Hello YouTube world, my name is Nicholas Montez, and today you're watching my YouTube channel, Nick, the Teenage Movie Critic. Welcome back to the YouTube channel, everybody. I'm so excited to have you back here again. And in today's video, we're going to be doing another tier list video. And today we are doing a tier list for Fast and Furious films because of the newly released Fast X that I just saw. So let's go ahead and get started talking about the Fast and Furious films. Alright, so my tier lists are usually self-explanatory. Usually it's A, B, C, D, F down to the worst, and A is the best, B is really good, C is okay, D is almost close to bad, and then F is the worst. So let's just go ahead and get started, and we're going to start off with the Fast and the Furious. The start off to this franchise. I thought it was okay. You know, obviously the best thing about it are the characters and the racing scenes, and the way it kind of established certain characters and the way the story played out, I thought was quite good. So for me, I'm going to put this one in the C tier. And obviously it's like, a lot of people were kind of, you know, there's a side of people that loved the first three films because of the racing, the street racing, and then there's people that still did like it when it turned to this action franchise. But if I'm being honest, I liked it more when it turned to the action franchise than it being a street racing franchise. So if I'm being honest, I wasn't a big fan of the way the franchise started. So then we get Too Fast, Too Furious, and this is one that I honestly just do not like. First off, it doesn't really have any of the other characters. It literally is a movie with Brian, and then the main positives of the movie are Roman Pierce and Tej. And I thought they're two great characters that really have a lot of great moments in the next couple of movies. But at the same time, I'm like, just not that great of a movie. It's just not that great of a movie. It's mostly forgettable, and then even there are some certain action set pieces that I did like, but overall it's forgettable mostly. So you're gonna go in the D tier for me. The Roman Pierce and Tej saved it for me, so I thought it was fine. Then we get the Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. I actually thought this was easily the weakest of these ones. Part of it is because, you know, this is actually the only one that I've never seen, and I finally saw it like last week, and I just was not a fan of it. It was bad. It did this whole story of I like when the other characters, it's cool when the other characters show up in the other films. Like, it's cool, and I did like the characters that they did establish in this movie. They just took him to Tokyo to get him the dad, and then establish all these other characters. I'm fine with that. I don't really care. Even when Han gets introduced, I don't really care about him. The way that it kind of ties in with all the other ones just kind of feels weird. Dom's only appears in it for till the end. It's just not the best movie. The only great thing about the movie really is the soundtrack, and certain elements do kind of work. The story, the main character has a cool little story going for him. So it's not entirely bad per se, but it's fine. So I'm going to put this one in the D tier, but it is the worst of the franchise. Then we get Fast and Furious, the fourth film in the franchise, and this is one where I was like, okay, this is actually kind of getting a little bit better, but it's not entirely better yet. Because, you know, there were some interesting stories that I that worked in this movie, where you had, you know, Dom trying to find out stuff of what happened to Letty, then Mia gets involved, and then Brian becomes an agent of the FBI, which it's kind of a cool story. And then, of course, you also introduce this character of Giselle, and then it kind of almost goes into that action series genre, but they don't do it really in the best way, and it almost feels like they're kind of setting up too much stuff that it feels unfocused. And so it's like, there's parts of it that I enjoy, but at the same time I'm like, it's not really the best one. And honestly, of all the Fast and Furious films, this is one I don't really tend to go back and rewatch because of how really forgettable it is. But then, so yeah, there are parts of it I enjoyed, but I didn't really love it as much. Then we get Fast 5, and this is one that I personally really loved. It's actually the best one in the bunch, so you're actually going in the top tier. And part of what makes this film great is that it really has a great established story where it feels more like a sequel to the first film than actual sequel to all these other movies, where the main story of this film ever since the first movie is that that these three people have always been victims of being criminals, and that's been set up since the first film, and they really shadow about that in this movie, and they're tired of running, they're tired of being on the run, they just want to live free lives, but they're also doing these car heists, and things have just gotten really bad that these other people are getting involved, and they're like, you know what? I'm tired of running. I want to live free. So they decide to think, how do we live free? We're gonna rob the richest guy in Rio, and we're just gonna buy our freedom. That's an awesome storyline. And so how do you rob the richest guy in Rio? You get a whole team together. So they bring in all the other characters from the past films, all of them from all four Fast and Furious films. All of them come back together. The interaction between, I love the little love story that we got between Han and Giselle was awesome. Seeing Roman and Tej again. Seeing these new Dominican Republic characters I thought were kind of cool, though for some reason they never came back in these other movies. And even when the other characters get introduced, it's like, it kind of makes sense as to why they're there. They're not just there because you want to see them again, but they make sense in light of the story that they're telling. And now, obviously, you know, we don't come to these movies to have a great story, to have Oscar-worthy storytelling, to have great character arcs. No, we come to these movies to have fun, especially these next couple movies. But with this one, I would say of all the films, it actually did tell a pretty good story that I thought was good. That was actually pretty good. And it's like, with all the characters, it makes sense because all of them are pretty much almost known as criminals. They have criminal records. They're not exactly the best people. And so, as they're involved in the story, it makes sense in light of what's going on. So, and when you get to the end of the film, when they finally get the money, their arcs are kind of completed. And I thought that was perfect in the way they did that. And then of course, you know, the introduction to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as Luke Hobbs, great addition. And then of course, as this is the start to the action franchise, with it being an action franchise, all the action in this movie is great. Whether it's the train heist where you have Ryan and Dom fighting guys on the train, you have this big chase scene between the favela on the rooftops of Brazil, as well as The Rock getting into it. You even have a fight between Dwayne Johnson, between Vin Diesel and The Rock. You even have this gunfight between soldiers and Luke Hobbs in the favela. And then of course you have a safe running down Rio. It is awesome. And then once you get to the end of the film, where Tej opens up that safe and you hear the song Danze Kuro, it's a song of triumph, but it's a song of happiness that we did it. We got the money. But it's also a song of relief. That it's like, we got it. We did it. We're free. And in the way that the epilogue plays out, it plays out in the way the characters are portrayed, and how they would, it plays out like, what would they do if they got this money? And they played out perfectly as Roman and Tej, they get these fancy suits, fancy cars, hot girls. Then you get the other Dominican guys, they win in gambling. And then Giselle and Han go their separate ways to wherever they're going to. And then you get to with Dom and Brian and Mia, and Dom's even saying, this is the happiest I've ever seen my sister. And then Brian's like, it's because we're free. And it's like the realization of that. They're free. They're done running. They're no longer criminals. And the way that that's done is just so powerful. It's great. And even in the last scene where you get Brian wanting another chance to race Dom and finally maybe beat him a little bit, that is an awesome scene. And it really just exits the film out. And then of course you get the end credits scene where they announce that Letty's alive. Ooh. So yeah, this film is obviously a fantastic film, and easily the best of the franchise. Then we get Fast and Furious 6, another pretty good addition to the franchise. Of course, you know, it introduces this whole different, of course, you know, this is where the franchise really gets into that action genre, where The Rock really actually asks Dom for help with his family. And this is kind of where part of my negatives with the future of the franchise with F9 and Fast X, where it's like they're just doing saving the world on their own. They're not, the reason why they're saving the world is because of The Rock. And when you just take The Rock out, it's like they're choosing to save the world on their own. Technically, The Rock is supposed to be saving the world, not them. It's not technically their responsibility. So it just kind of feels, it feels a little bit off at first with the other films. But with Fast and Furious 6, I feel like the story in here, there's not really a story here, you know, it's catastrophic, where they want to blind a whole city just to kill all of them in 1 minute, for 24 hours just to kill all of them. It'll take time for 24 hours to kill them all. Kind of cool, but very catastrophic. But the big thing that really is great about it is that you have cars fighting tanks, plus Vin Diesel and The Rock teaming up to fight bad guys. Michelle Rodriguez versus Gina Carano. You also get Letty in here, who is kind of like this Winter Soldier type, who has amnesia. Of course, all the characters get funny moments. And this is probably the more memorable film. This is one that I would say is good, but it's not fantastic like Fast 5 was. But it still is very good, and so I still did like it a lot, though. And also the action was great, too. Then we get Furious 7, and honestly, this is a film that I honestly really liked. Of course, the story is pretty good. It has, you know, a lot of great action set pieces. But I love those stories where, you know, you have this small family, and then you have Shaw, and then you have the guy from Captain Marvel and Guardians of the Galaxy coming in, being the villain. Then you got the introduction of Mr. Nobody, and it introduces all these different factions. And it's like, I love the newness to it, and kind of doing something kind of different. It's like doing all these different versions. It's like, it's awesome. I like doing the big and massive stuff. It's awesome. And then all the action set pieces, whether it's like cars driving through buildings and then having amazing crashes. And then of course having, you know, all these girl boss fights between Letty and fighting all these girls. And then of course, you know, even the stuff they do with Brian, as this is his last film, all of that stuff with him and fighting this guy that knows these kung fu skills really well, all that was great. Even the stuff that we get with what was his name? Even the stuff that we get with that fight with Jason Statham and Vin Diesel on the upper deck parking lot, where they have this big street fight, and it's awesome. The street fight is awesome, but then you also get some great moments. And I would say probably my biggest issue with the film, we don't get a lot of Rock in here. He's literally defeated by Jason Statham. He gets blown up by saving Elena in the first couple minutes of the movie. Only the first couple minutes, but he's mostly out in a hospital somewhere, in a hospital bed, not most of the movie. Though we do get to learn about his daughter, so that was an interesting aspect of the film that I liked. But also, you do get some pretty good moments when he gets to the end of the film and he's out, you know, fighting guys, and you know, he's shooting down drones and shooting down helicopters with a machine gun. all that's awesome. So I thought the action in here worked, and then the best part of the movie was we get this tribute to Paul Walker, as this was the final film that we saw Paul Walker play Brian O'Connor. Just a fantastic conclusion to his character. Even though he still exists in this franchise, excuse my dad if you heard someone sneeze, that was him. Just a great conclusion to it. And honestly, looking back at a film like Wakanda Forever, I feel like the tribute to Chadwick Boseman should have been something like that. I was kind of sad it wasn't, and I feel like that would have been a unique way to take inspiration for a tribute for someone. But I'm like, they probably couldn't do it, but it's fine. But overall, I thought this film was really good, and for that reason, you're gonna go in B tier, above Fast and Furious 6. Mainly because I love the action more, and I love all the humorous stuff. Oh, and also the introduction of Ramsey was cool too. Then we get the Fate of the Furious, and this is where I feel like the franchise just kind of fell apart. Where, because they lost Ryan, it felt really hard to how to continue the story forward. Now, of course, the big stuff I loved about this movie, whether it came to the interactions between The Rock and Jason Statham, awesome. Loved it. All the action set pieces, pretty great. The fight scene in the prison, pretty good. I thought the whole storyline I thought Charlize Theron played a pretty good villain. She was pretty threatening and mesmerizing. I just didn't really understand the whole plot line. Why would Dom betray his family when his whole thing is about family? Like, you can never turn your back on family. Kind of weird. And it's like, it was just kind of weird at certain parts. And even with the whole driving on ice, I just didn't really think was all that great. It's like, it wasn't exactly as exciting. The whole part with the baby and him having a son and him naming him Brian, I thought that was a nice little tribute to Brian O'Connor. So overall, I thought that was pretty good. But overall, it's not the best one. I would say it's the most fun, but it's not the best. It's the most fun, but it's not the best. It's gonna go above Fast and Furious. And then we have Hobbs and Shaw, the first spin-off in our Fast and Furious films. And I have to say, this is actually one of my favorite ones. First off, it took that thing that we loved about the Fate of the Furious and basically just put it in one movie, and there you go. You get cinematic fast food. You get cinematic junk food. You get cinematic awesomeness. All the interactions in this movie is hilarious. Even to this day, I still kind of chuckle at certain scenes in the movie because it's just that damn hilarious. Of course, the story, it's generic as hell, but do I really care? Not really. Of course, the introduction to Shaw's sister, even just exploring more of them as the film is all about them, whether it's exploring more of Shaw's history with his sister, plus his mom, but also exploring more of Hobbs, his background, the little story with his family, and then kind of getting them involved and being in the third act, and that's the location of the third act was pretty great. And then even introducing Idris Elba in here as Brixton, this sort of black Superman type character, I thought was pretty cool, and he was pretty badass. And even all the action sequences were pretty great. My biggest complaint about the action in this film, though, is when you compare it to the other films feel big and massive. When you watch this movie, like, the action doesn't feel as intense, brutal, or that big. It's like when you get to the third act, when they disarm the guns, sure, you could still, I feel like you could still go big and massive with that. But I feel like maybe you could have hit these guys a little harder to, like, get them to go down, and you could have had this big brawl-out war. But I don't know. I still loved it. And then, of course, the final fight between Hobbs and Shaw, where they fight Brixton. Of course, fantastic stuff. You get a great Fast and Furious spin-off film. It was awesome. And then we have F9. This is where the franchise where I feel like it was honestly disappointing. Now, obviously, of course, when I went to the theater that day, obviously, I couldn't review it. First off, the thing I got mad about this film, I couldn't review it. Because the day I watched this movie before, I think like a couple hours before, I actually got my second vaccine shot. So, and I came home late. And so I wasn't able to review it or even rank the franchise. Like, but I'm glad I'm doing it now. But, you know, I had a lot of fun with it. Of course, all the insanity that went into this film, from having a car swinging on a vine like Tarzan, to magnet cars, and then a car going to space. All that's pretty fun. And all the other action set pieces, whether it's the little fight scenes between Mia and Letty, whether it's the fights between Dom and Jacob, and John Cena's character, all that's pretty good. The problem here, the story was just terrible. The bringing back of Han was pretty cool. I liked some of the newer characters that they brought in. The big problem that I have with this film, though, is the whole story just, like, you didn't care for it. It's like, part of the reason with Fast and Furious 6 is they at least did something. Like, part of the thing I liked about Fast and Furious 6 is that they created a story that you kind of cared about. And with this movie, it's like, you don't really care about the story, and they have too much going on. They introduce too many characters, and it's like, this is where I feel like the family just gets probably a little too big, and you're going to all these different locations, and it just does not do justice to it. And it makes it feel like it's the final film, but it's not. And it just makes it so weird. So for me, and then even the stuff of just not killing the characters off, this film just easily does not have any stakes. And it's like, and even though and yeah, I forget to mention, they literally had a cameo of Cardi B in here. I'm like, I remember hearing Cardi B was going to be in this movie, and I'm like, oh, this doesn't, I don't know if this works that much. It does not really work that much. So for me, I had a ton of fun with it. A lot of cool action, great insanity moments. The story, however, and the way everything works out, and even in the characters that were introduced in this movie, they don't even come back in Fast X. And they're part of this family. So I'm like, are they going to come back in Fast X Part 2? We'll have to wait and see, because they didn't get, I'm not sure if they got killed off or not, of that family that Dante's going after, but for me, I'm going to put it in high C, because I enjoyed it a lot, but it has probably the weakest and does a little too much. And then finally we have Fast X, and I would definitely say this was definitely one of the better films of the franchise. Of course, you know, it still has all the insane moments that you want from a Fast and Furious film, whether it's the action, the comedy, but it still it kind of feels a little bit more reality-based, where you have characters going from place to place. You have them going to different locations. It's all fun in that. But the thing I really loved about this film was the way that the stakes were done, where it kind of feels like, yeah, the characters did actually die, and they're not actually coming back from this. And yeah, you know, probably there were a few too many jokes, and the transition scenes were probably a little bit too weird, and certain characters didn't get enough time in the spotlight. But at the same time, I thought the way that they established the stakes in the movie, the way that it kind of did certain things, I thought was better for what they did with this movie than what they did with other films. So for me, I'm gonna have to put Fast X in the C tier, just because I thought it was a little bit of a better film. Not entirely, but it is a good movie. I can't put it in that B tier just because I don't think it's that fantastic of a film, but it is good, and so it's going a little bit higher than what F9 was, though it's still in the same category as F9. Alright, so that's my ranking of that's my tier list of the Fast and Furious films. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. All my social media stuff is in the about section over there. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.